It starts with the protagonist named Hart, who had shut himself in his room for years after being horribly bullied in his high school. Lost in his own sadness, suddenly he found himself reincarnated by a beautiful goddess. Hart quickly realized that he must have died and was granted a second chance in a new world filled with magic. The goddess informed Hart that she would give him cheat skills to help him in his new life. The goddess completed his reincarnation. To Hart's surprise, he was reborn as a baby, and to make matters more insane, he turned out to be the son of the king. He also bears the royal insignia on his body. As excitement filled the king's heart as he anticipated his son to possess immense strength, he ordered his advisor to perform a magical assessment to determine Hart's power. They expected him to be at least level 40. As his mother was the hero who had defeated the Demon King. However, they were all flabbergasted when the assessment revealed that Hart was merely a level 2 and had no elemental abilities. The king and his wife couldn't comprehend how they had ended up with such a seemingly useless son. Fearing it would bring shame upon the royal family if it's exposed, the king and his wife made a cruel decision as he ordered for Hart to be disposed of in a faraway forest. Hart was devastated to hear that he was about to die again right after being granted a second chance at life. The goddess who had reincarnated Hart actually forgot the measuring devices in this world can only go up to 2 digits, and she gave him level 1002. All alone in the forest, Hart felt powerless and helpless, but he remembers his ability to use barrier magic. He decided to give it a try. He managed to form a barrier cube and effortlessly altering its size and shape. He even lifted himself into the air. However, his peaceful moment was stopped when a gigantic wolf suddenly appeared. Fear coursed through his heart. Hart then gathered his barriers to wield trees as weapons. But still the wolf remained determined to eliminate Hart from this world. Hart decides to escalate his attack using his barriers and lifts an enormous chunk of the ground as he prepared to crush the wolf. A voice is heard through the chaos pleading for surrender. Hart halted his attack only to discover that the wolf could talk. Hart then engages in a conversation with the wolf, who couldn't fathom his extraordinary strength and believed him to be the reincarnation of the Demon King. Hart, the big brain, played along with the wolf's assumption of the title Demon King. The wolf, now known as Flay, acknowledged defeat and swore loyalty to Hart, mistaking their interaction as a pact. Despite Hart's attempts to explain, she refused to listen, convinced of their newfound bond. However, Hart suddenly collapsed. He needs breast milk.
He needs some milk!
Flay, who just transformed into a human, tries to help but discovered she had no milk. Suddenly, Flay heard someone approaching and she contemplated eliminating the newcomer. Hart, being wise, urged her to try doing what is called a conversation. Hart then uses his barrier magic and established a telepathic connection, allowing Flay to hear him from a distance. The newcomer revealed himself as Hart's relative, claiming to be there to save Hart. He then explained his own personal tragedy of losing a child during pregnancy and expressed his belief that every child deserved a chance at life. Touched by his words, Flay couldn't help but to cry, and a deal was made with the newcomer. He agreed to take Flay in as well, recognizing her bond with Hart, leaving behind evidence to suggest Hart's demise. The newcomer ensured that Hart and Flay could live together under his care. 9 years have passed since Hart grew up in his new family, who had shown him unwavering kindness, although he had initially planned to leave once he no longer requires milk. But their love and support had changed his mind. But he is faced with a problem. Charlotte, who seemed to dislike him. Flay, now serving as their maid, is really close with Charlotte. As Hart is watching them, his mom explained him that Charlotte's behavior was a result of her age and unfamiliarity with interacting with boys. He then feels the need to prove himself as a reliable individual. However, he remembered that maybe she knows he was a 30-year-old man reincarnated. Hart's father then takes Hart into the yard to teach him swordsmanship, even though Hart's lack of interest in it, who is aware of his father's expertise in battle, believed he had no chance against him. As the training began, Hart instinctively cast a barrier to protect himself and charges at his father, which broke his sword in the process. But the damage shocked his father, who then urged Hart to try dodging his next attack. And to everyone's surprise, Hart effortlessly evaded his father's strike, a feat that he believes to be impossible for anyone under level 30. Hart couldn't help but wonder why his powers were so exceptional. Even when he attempted to measure them with the strongest crystal ball, he only sees the number 002 displayed. That night, Hart's father told his wife, expressing his concern that Hart could potentially be a demon, as he revealed the existence of secret records detailing that there are instances of the royal family breeding with demons, resulting in some children being born with demonic traits. Hart's mother defended her son, insisting that he appeared perfectly as human being. Despite these concerns, Hart's father reassured his wife that Hart is still their son and will have a happy life. But what Charlotte, who heard all of the talk, was stunned by the possibility of her brother being a demon. Hart activates his surveillance system as he lies in his bed. He discovered that the castle soldiers all have returned with severe injuries. The medic unit tries their best to heal the wounded, but to no avail. Hart then approaches his father, who is sitting in a corner. He reveals that the province has recently been experiencing a wave of attacks from thieves. He then received information about the thieves' base and led his army there, hoping to catch them off guard. However, they were unexpectedly ambushed and destroyed by the thieves. Hart remains silent and obediently leaves. But on his way back, he got mad at Flay when she mocks the royal soldiers for being beaten by a band of thieves. Hart tells her to shut up. On his way back, Hart secretly uses his magic to completely heal all the wounded soldiers, which surprised everyone. In the middle of the night, Hart wakes up to find Flay weirdly just standing outside his room. He then asks her if she has been waiting there the whole time, but she doesn't respond. Hart realized that Flay is following his order that he had given her to shut up back then. Hart apologizes for losing his temper and gives Flay her permission to speak again. He then takes her to the castle's rooftop to show her the surveillance system he has set up for the entire province. He then reveals that he wants to locate the thieves who attacked his father and the royal soldiers. He then spots the gang of thieves who is celebrating in the woods and notices that some of them are dressed as soldiers. Realizing that this is the location where his father's men were ambushed, Hart, after big brain thinking, told Flay that the thieves must have known about the planned attack due to a spy within the castle. Determined to eliminate the thieves and uncover the spy, Hart commands Flay to burn their hideout to ashes without leaving any evidence of their involvement. On their way back, Hart decides to send an anonymous letter to his father explaining the events that occurred in the fort. The next day, Gold's advisor learned about the spies from the neighboring kingdom and the annihilation of the fort. The advisor confirms the truth by interrogating the captured thieves, who barely escaped the fire. Meanwhile, Charlotte becomes curious about who dealt with the thieves. Gold assumes it must be Flay given her lack of empathy and superior strength as a demon. However, Charlotte suspects Hart's involvement and seeks answers from Flay. She directly asks if there are two Harts, because she had seen him flying with Flay, but based on her knowledge, Hart shouldn't possess enough mana to fly. So she sneaks into Hart's room and finds him peacefully sleeping, but she notices the absence of his menacing aura. Impressed by Charlotte's perceptiveness, Flay acknowledges that Hart has been blessed with immense power surpassing human limits. She even brags about his greatness. Charlotte, intrigued, asks Flay who Hart truly is. Instead of providing a direct answer, she advises Charlotte not to worry about such trivial matters and focus on her own growth. Flay informs Hart that Charlotte is aware of his night trips and the existence of his clone. Hart decides to increase the surveillance on her to prevent her from discovering his secret. But Charlotte continues to secretly follow him, spying on his study sessions with Flay, observing his training sessions, and even his baths. But Hart the Pro maintains his innocent facade by behaving like an ordinary child. After a week of discreet surveillance, everything seems to return to normal. However, Hart's mother plans to take Charlotte on a trip as the annual festival approaches. Hart suggests that Flay accompany them. Hart asks Flay to intimidate the monsters in the province to prevent them from attacking nearby towns and villages. One night, Hart's surveillance alarm shows that something is wrong with her. The Empire soldiers have ambushed Natalia and Charlotte during their journey, and the soldiers are struggling to defend them. Natalia attempts to run while carrying Charlotte, but the Empire soldiers use his magic to injure her leg. She then follows Charlotte's instructions and got led into a cave. She puts Charlotte to hide inside and went out to face the soldiers. As she is about to not be a prisoner of war, Hart arrives in the nick of time, saving her and swiftly defeats all the Empire soldiers. He then carries Natalia back into the cave where they sought refuge. He then conceals his presence from Charlotte as he alters his voice and instructs Charlotte to take care of her mother until help arrives. Charlotte does sense this intimidating evil aura. She pops out and asks Hart if he is an ally of justice. Hart's mind struggles to comprehend her question, but he decides to play along, telling her that he is indeed a hero of justice. Charlotte, remembering that Flay said, concludes that Hart indeed has been blessed with immense powers. She approaches him and apologizes for misjudging him. Hart tells Charlotte to keep his identity as an ally of justice a secret. Charlotte promises to even lie to her father to protect his secret. He then gives an anonymous letter detailing Natalia and Charlotte's safety during the attack and Flay's presence as their escort, which causes no casualties and all the injured soldiers have been fully healed. Bringing a sense sense of relief to Gold, he turns to Hart and asks him about his thoughts on the anonymous hero. Hart believes that they are an ally of justice and reassures Gold that they will take care of the Empire soldiers. However, Hart's statement turns out to be very sus because the letter didn't mention that the attackers were actually Empire soldiers. Fearing his father's suspicion, Hart quickly comes up with an excuse to divert his father's attention. Finally, Charlotte and Natalia returns home. Charlotte approaches her brother and hugs him. Everyone is confused as they never even spoken a single word to each other.